Today's webinar, we're basically talking about experimentation. We're talking about how to get that experimentation into production and how to actually then leverage some of the awesome features that AWS offers in terms of its platform to be able to actually deliver that experimentation into a production ready component as quickly as possible. And I'll let Tony speak about that later, so I won't steal his thunder. But fundamentally, what we're talking about is solving the two challenges around innovation. So the first part of that challenge with innovation is how do we get there quickly? So how do we build that? How do we get it into production? How do we actually make it possible? And so the key element around that is obviously looking at how you can automate. So creating a mechanism and an environment that allows you to innovate quickly and support what you're trying to do. Fundamentally, what you're trying to do is build, obviously, either new features or new customer experience as quickly as possible, test it, see that that actually adds value, and if it does, move it into production. If it doesn't, fail fast, throw it away, come up with the next concept and try that. And so to do that, obviously you need to have some very key pillars in place that will allow you to build. The first one of those is a pipeline and workflow. So by creating a mechanism and repository that allows you to have and commit code readily and easily. So that could be AWS Code Commit, for example. And within that structure, building out a workflow. In that workflow, you then obviously need to be able to test and validate what you're doing. So when you commit your code or your new piece of infrastructure code that you're writing, that obviously needs to be validated to make sure that it meets standards, make sure it actually passes testing criteria, make sure it puts in some governance and compliance, and make sure that obviously it's not going to break your environment, which is obviously ultimately even more important. And then once that's in place, being able to kick off as part of that workflow, an automated provision. And this is where the interaction with something like Terraform could help you build the environment for you. Now that could be day two operations, so that could be updating infrastructure that is already being built and provisioned, and you're just making some adds, moves, or changes to that, which Terraform allows you to do. Or it could be the standing up of a whole new environment in part of a blue-green deployment, for example, where you're building a whole new experimental area. You'll bleed off some of your production customers to test this. And then if that works, you then actually move it into delivery. And so as we work through those fundamental pieces, they all need to be in place and stitched together and make sure that you have that methodology in place to allow you to actually experiment and innovate. And that's fundamental key pieces that are required regardless of how or what platform or what you're trying to do. You'll need these elements in place to be able to experiment freely. The other challenge that obviously comes about is then how do you implement security? And this is where Vault and using Vault as a mechanism to be able to do that helps solve that challenge of the security component. And what we're talking about is Vault is fundamentally an API-driven mechanism. So Vault is a software binary that can be deployed across any environment in a highly scalable and highly redundant infrastructure. So that could be across availability zones, could be across regions, could be even across environments. So you could have this across on-premise and into AWS, for example. So you can keep your secrets wherever you need to for data sovereignty and manage those things. But what it fundamentally does is have a API-driven component that, because that API can be driven from a workflow, so now you could tie that back into your pipeline, you can use it as a mechanism to pull secrets or pull passwords, pull whatever highly sensitive information is from Vault and inject that into your automatic process. So now you don't have to worry about making sure that the password is hard coded into your code. You can use high grade one-time passwords and API connections to actually start to experiment in a secure way. They can all be time bombed. So Vault has built into it a TTL, so time to live. That means that secrets can be password basically timed out and would have to be automatically renewed. So that whole thing around how long do I have a temporary password for and how long do I set it up can all be managed as part of the Vault criteria. Now Vault has a mechanism in it where it needs to be sealed. So Vault is a crypto bank where the interaction with the actual core element is done after you unseal it. That unsealing mechanism hooks into something such as AWS KMS, which holds the primary keys. And now you can start to see this interaction around using Vault and tying it into the existing cloud native infrastructure to get an easy operation and to be able to stand up and scale these criteria easily. Other important elements with Vault is you need to, or any client that is interoperating with it needs to authenticate against a known identity and trusted identity sort. That can be AWS's EC2, for example. It could be an IAM role. And so using those mechanisms, you can now interoperate where your instance and your instance type has to be authenticated. When it is recognized and authenticated, then it can actually interoperate with that secrets component. And so with that in mind, you can see how fitting these things together, you can now centralize your secrets management around leveraging Vault. Now, obviously, there are some cloud native tools that would obviously do some of these components. But what we're talking about is taking it past that simple use case and into the broader, more complex scenarios where we're doing this across different regions, different areas, where we're looking to actually create a centralized login and feed that login into a seam. We can rotate those secrets on a dynamic basis. And then also one of the additional features that you get with Vault is it's also a PKI. So you can do a full PKI environment and manage your certificates in a central place as well. So all of these things tie together to obviously reduce that risk of potential breaches by having things hard-coded. We reduce costs because we bring it all into a centralized component, and increasing the speed of agility and that ability to innovate, because all of your developers now have a single API element that they can write against and use that or reuse that code set that they have written for that interaction in multiple different places. So you create a single standard and allow them to actually write to that standard. And this again makes it faster for developers to actually innovate and test and get into that pipeline. Obviously, within the aspect of developing and looking at what you're building, you need to obviously be really conscious of how you can encrypt, both at rest, within a data set, or on the fly. And so one of the advantages, or one of the benefits that Vault has, is our transit engine. And that transit engine offers up an encryption as a service mechanism where an application can be pulled through Vault. We will encrypt that and then write that into whatever the store is needed for that. So you can actually encrypt within that construct and write to a database. We also have the advanced data protection module, which means that you can actually do tokenization within that structure. So if you wanted to keep PCI or credit card data, for example, you could encrypt that in that format and actually then expose just the last few digits that support staff needed to see to validate in a customer use case. So there's lots of flexibility around how you encrypt that data and lots of flexibility around making sure that it is encrypted. And of course, when we're working in with your cloud or your AWS and looking at how we can really tie those value propositions together, now you can see where leveraging things such as AWS KMS to unlock and unwrap or unseal Vault so that you can actually use it and interoperate with it, looking how you can authenticate an instance as it stands up. So in this scenario, we're using an instance ID where it is being, the EC2 metadata is being written, It then pushes that as a public API into Vault. Vault checks to see that that is actually alive. So is this instance real? It then says, I am validating that and will authenticate against that instance. And so now your instance ID can actually work with and interoperate whilst receiving a token and work with whichever API backend or database or whatever that token is needed to access. And so you can build that automatic secrets management and that ability to innovate and develop quickly by being able to integrate using native elements within the AWS platform to authenticate against your central secret store and leverage that power across your cloud platform. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tony to talk about some of the actual commercial and platform components that will allow you to spin up some of these elements really quickly and start to actually experiment with Vault itself in an easy and operational way. Tony, over to you.
All right. Thanks, David. So Vault indeed is a very, very awesome product that a lot of our AWS customers take use of. So in trying to make that experimentation and kind of POC type environments, achievable in a way such that, nearly push button, we decided to work closely with HashiCorp and create a Quickstart. I'll touch a little bit about what Quickstarts are. What Quickstarts are basically high-quality reference architectures that are meant to be expanded based on a customer's use. So we worked with HashiCorp to provide a HA environment that is based on the open source Vault and that will deploy into multiple regions and can be used. My peer Andrew Gargan will cover in detail what that is, how that's all set up. So I'll just kind of give you a little bit of a touch on what the Quickstart models are. We also have a few all the other HashiCorp products in Quickstarts as well. There's about 200 roughly Quickstarts at this point, and of which the HashiCorp ones are heavily used. So again, you can take these CloudFormation templates and you can modify them. They're Apache licensed, so you can use them in whatever way you want. They're meant to be kind of modifiable, if you will. So in each Quickstart has some similar components. So in here, I'm just going to show you the Vault one, which Andrew will cover in detail, but each one of them show you kind of what it's going to deploy and a short document that says how would you go and modify it based on parameters and kind of customize it to your liking. So take a look at it. To get to all the Quickstarts, you can go to either aws.com/Quickstart, or mostly the way I get to it is just type AWS Quickstart in Google and it's the first link. So that's usually faster for me, at least. I don't have to type as much. So we recently, just a little plug here, we recently expanded the Quickstart program into using native Terraform assets as well. So once you're in there, you can look around and you'll see a growing catalog of Terraform-based modules that we're just starting to launch. We launched that last year at the end of 2020. So you'll see more of those kind of coming up in the time to come. So with that said, I don't want to take too much time up from Andrew, who's going to dive into the Quickstart here specifically for Vault and show you a demo. And he's also the primary developer for the latest versions of the Vault and HashiCorp references. So I'm just going to kind of pass it on to Andrew here, and take it away, Andrew.
Thanks, Tony. I'm just going to roll the demo now, so you should see a video starting soon. I'm just going to talk to the points that we see on the screen. Okay, so what you can see here is a fairly typical high availability architecture on Amazon over 3 availability zones. We've got auto scaling groups for the Vault servers, an optional Bastion host. We are using AWS Secrets Manager to initially store the recovery keys and the initial root token for Vault once it's been bootstrapped. We have AWS KMS key for Vault Server Auto Unsealed. The EC2 instances and the auto scaling groups are either Ubuntu LTS or a CIS level 1 Ubuntu image, hardened image. There's an application load balancer to front the Vault server hosts. By default, it's internal to the VPC, but it can be made public for demo purposes or POC purposes. The load balancer itself requires a proper ACM SSL certificate. We can generate one for you in the Quickstart if you provide a public Route 53 hosted zone and a DNS name. Otherwise, you can provide your own ACM certificate by uploading it beforehand and just providing the ARN. Logging for the Vault servers is sent to CloudWatch logs. As I said, there's an optional Bastion host which can be launched as part of the Quickstart to allow you easy access onto those Vault servers in a sort of demo scenario, and an optional client host autoscaling group to allow you to see how to connect clients, and a practical example of connecting EC2 clients using the IAM authentication mechanism to Vault itself. And as Sonny said, like this infrastructure as code, this is all deployed via CloudFormation. We should see shortly the the landing page for this Quickstart. Okay, so as Tony mentioned, each of the Quickstarts have a page like this in the catalog. This Quickstart allows you to deploy either into a new VPC or an existing VPC, and it comes with a detailed deployment guide to help you prepare for the deployments and to understand all the parameters that are available on launch of this Quickstart. So all the sort of things you can tweak. So here's the CloudFormation launch screen. So we name the stack that we're going to launch. We select the availability zones it's going to launch in, configure the networking. Specifically here I've added is like access from anywhere. You'd obviously want to lock that down. You can select whether or not there's a Bastion host, select the version of Vault that you'd like to install, whether to use Ubuntu or the CIS images, how many Vault server nodes you'd like, what kind of instance types you need for your Vault servers, as well as whether you want client nodes. You'll also see there's a section for configuring a Vault to be accessible from a Kubernetes environment. You can put in information from your Kubernetes environment to allow it to talk to Vault from the get-go after installation. And the load balancer can, as I said before, be either internal or external. And we set up the DNS name for the SSL certificate, and I've provided a hosted zone here so that the Quickstart can build up my ACM certificate for me. So this Quickstart takes roughly 25 minutes to build out all that infrastructure that you saw in the architecture diagram. On the output screen of the CloudFormation console, you'll be able to see pertinent technical information. So the Bastion host ID, where are the logs going, what is the client role that's been set up so that EC2 instances can communicate and authenticate against Vault. Where is the actual load balancer so that I can go and connect and log on to Vault? And where is that initial root token stored in terms of AWS? Like what is that secret? So here's the Vault cluster that would be stood up. I'm just going to get the Vault secret here from Secrets Manager. Need to unlock that. Taking that root token and go back to logging into Vault. Okay. So this is now fronted by the application load balancer with that the ACM SSL certificate that I mentioned earlier. You'll see we're unsealed, automatically unsealed. We're using Raft storage as the storage backend. You can see that's all working and happy. We've got the AWS Authentication mechanism enabled by default. I'm just going to sign out here and then just log on to like the terminal and jump onto the one of the actual Vault servers and just show you a little bit there as well. So the Bastion host, and that just makes it really simple if you want to kind of just have a toy environment or proof of concept environment. You can just jump onto the Bastion host and then onto one of the Vault servers. Just checking Vault, you can see the same. It's initialized. It's unsealed. Just listing the raft peers for the storage. And just showing you some of the config for the KMS auto unseal that's there. So it's using AWS KMS for auto unseal. And now I'm just going to log in here to a client, a Vault client, and just show the login to the Vault cluster. Oops. Just need to use the right mechanism. So I'm going to specify to use the AWS auth and specify the role. And there you can see my client machine is connected to the Vault server. Great, so now you have your Vault server stood up. You have all of the stuff in the infrastructure diagram. All that infrastructure is already rolled out for you. The Vault is bootstrapped. Again, as Tony mentioned, these quick starts are open source, so you can find the code available on GitHub if you want to scratch around and take a look, or even take this quick start, fork it, and extend it specifically for your use case. You're welcome to do so. And also, please, if you would like help or input, feel free to reach out on GitHub. And yeah, thanks, Tony. Can I send it back to you?
Yeah, sure. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that detailed look into what the Quickstart there sets up. So yeah, you do reach out to us if you have any questions around that. There's quite a bit of automation there that's done, so it is quite flexible. So thanks for that walkthrough, Andrew. So I just wanted to cover one last thing, and then we'll open up for questions. So we have an AWS marketplace. I'm sure most AWS customers are familiar with that. The marketplace allows us to list software from different vendors and systems integrators that allow us to kind of pull that software using a very native AWS mechanism. In that, we also have a Vault open source listing, which allows you to, basically subscribe to that and get access to Vault. That Vault quick start there that you just saw is shortly going to be linked as the primary mechanism for deployment here in this marketplace listing. So you'll actually be able to subscribe to this, pull it, and deploy that architecture that Andrew just walked us through right out of 1 click, 2 click actually. 1 click to subscribe, 2 clicks to launch. So that'll be coming out here shortly. And Marketplace also allows us to have private seller listings. So that allows you to take advantage of other pricing things that you may have already a relationship with HashiCorp and have some agreements on price. So you can also have a private seller listing and be able to consume that also through Marketplace. So that's something to keep in mind. So that kind of wraps up what we've built on the Quickstart team in conjunction with HashiCorp on the Vault product. Happy to get your questions and answers, and I'll also pass it back to David to kick that off.
Thanks, Andy. So there is one question. So we have a question here that says, what is the difference between Vault Enterprise and Vault Open Source? So I suppose taking a step back and just talking, most of the things that we've talked about here have been driven through the open source component. So the ability to do security is something that HashiCorp feels quite strongly about without necessarily having to actually pay for all of that security. So a lot of the features, or most of these features that we've talked about here, are actually available. One of the things that isn't is that advanced data protection module that I mentioned earlier around how to do tokenization. The ability to then also separate this into separate namespaces, and that ability to then reuse, app one in test, dev, staging, production. That is the namespace element is another enterprise feature. So there is there is a lot of differences in moving from the innovation and testing stage into actually moving into the production. And of course, support is provided as part of that move into production. Those elements can also be bought and procured via the marketplace in a private offer. So there is the open source version is there on marketplace, but there is the ability to do a private offer with your AWS rep and the marketplace BD if you want to take advantage of that when it comes through.